This is Shirley Johnson with SkulpTools, and I'd like to show you today another tutorial on various different techniques. I'm going to talk a little bit about armatures, about conditioning clay, and about some tools that I use. So I thought I'd start out by showing you some of the work that I've done with the tools that I'll be showing you, and with some variations on the armature techniques that I used for these particular sculptures. Okay, I'd like to talk a little bit now about some ideas for conditioning clay. I use clay that I've had for quite some time that I got from a bunch of different sources, and I live in Arizona, so a lot of times the clay has been kind of a little overbaked before it's been used, and it's a shame because it makes it very difficult to really condition it and use it properly. But that's a challenge that we sometimes deal with. Some of the stores get things in the summertime. They get their supplies delivered in the summertime, and when it sits in a truck for a while, polymer clay tends to get hardened up. So that's what we deal with. But I'm going to show you just a little bit about some options that you can do to condition clay that's a little bit tough. And this applies pretty much to all the major brands, whether it be Kato, Fimo, any of the Sculpey brands like Sculpey, or the Primo Sculpey, and those types of clay. You can use these same techniques. Some of the things I'm going to show you here you can add in small amounts is the liquid Sculpey like TLS. There's also brands made by Kato and by Fimo, similar types of things. That's a liquid form of polymer clay. It is bakeable, but in small quantities, brushed on a little bit of clay, it can be used to condition clay. Another thing that is very useful is transparent or translucent clay, and that's what color this is, and whether you could see that. It says transparent, and I've been told that transparent and translucent are relatively the same thing. In this case, it's Fimo Effects is the brand and the type, but it's there's some contents in here that really help in small quantities to condition tough clay. Another thing you can do, again, I would suggest just, if you're doing a fairly small amount of clay, use only a couple of drops, and that would be the diluent, which adds the plasticizer back into the clay that has leached out and caused it to harden. An excellent ingredient that I also use in small quantities that is just excellent for conditioning really tough clay is the Sculpey mold maker, and I'll show you a little block of that I have separately, and that is primarily what I've used on a lot of these different clays which I have prepared here to get ready to use on my sculpture. Now, before I go over the clays a little bit more, I want to tell you a couple of things that you can do to treat the surface of clay. One of them is alcohol, and some people use that to smooth the surface. It tends to really take surface scratches and wrinkles down very quickly, but it also kind of removes a little bit of the surface of the clay, so you want to use that sparingly and very carefully. What I prefer to use is just a little bit of water, and I don't know whether you can see my little water bottle there, and then I put a little water in an appropriate little container and usually dip a paintbrush, various different types of paintbrushes, to do the final finishing. And you'll notice an unusual bottle of furniture cleaner. Seems like an odd thing to have in your clay area. What I do is I work on, whether you can see here, it's actually a glass cutting board. Let's see if I can show you the corner of it here. It has rubber ends, and it's fairly good sized cutting board. There's the other corner of it there. When I want to clean my clay area from little particles of clay or the oil film that gets left behind, that orange glow is excellent for doing that. It takes the residue of the clay so that I don't mix colors together and dilute the colors. But it also helps me clean my tools, and it is particularly good for things like, I'm going to be showing you these in a little more detail a little later, silicone tools, because it leaves just a fine oil finish that sheds clay, and it also cleans off all the clay residue that's left over on there. If you spray some of that cleaner onto a cloth, you can clean up your clay area quite easily. And some of the surfaces that you can use an old mirror, a piece of glass like I have, a large piece of ceramic tile you can get at old surplus building supply stores, and there's just many different non-porous slick surfaces that make working on clay a lot easier. I'm going to show you a couple of other things that help with conditioning clay. I raided my local Goodwill store, and in there they had something I'd never seen before. It's a food warmer that you put in the microwave, and it has instructions on the back. You put it in a microwave for 3 or 4 minutes, and this, I guess it's a ceramic material, gets warm, and you can use it like a trivet at your table, put food on, keep it hot. Well, it's ideal for keeping clay warm, and when you're trying to condition tough clay, keeping it warm is really important. It makes it very helpful, and there's various ways that you can do it. This is just one of them. It was just something that I ran into that I thought I could use. You don't want to get it too hot because it will start baking the clay. Ideally, what you want to have is about body temperature, or maybe just a little bit warmer. Whatever source of heat that you have, that's about the temperature that you want to have. So sometimes you might want to use an insulating piece of cloth and wrap your clay in plastic. So that's one way. And what I do is I put that warming tray on top of another thing that I raided from the Goodwill store for $3 or $4. It's a potpourri cooker, and I just plug it in and it gets warm, and I put that warming tray on top of there, and it transfers the heat up through the bottom of it, so I don't have to keep going back and forth to the microwave and warm it up. You can use a hot water bottle, you can use a heating pad. There's various different things, but just be very aware to not get the clay too hot. What a lot of people do is they'll have a little bit of clay in a bag and put it in their pocket, or sit on it, or various things. But in the background, you see a couple of other things that I have dedicated strictly for polymer clay, because you can't use them for food afterwards. And that's an old food processor, which chops the clay up to about the size and consistency of large curd cottage cheese. And it's particularly good for mixing colors, but as it's churning around in there, it warms the clay and helps condition it. So that's why I'm mentioning it now. I use it a lot when I'm mixing kind of granulated colors together, where I want to keep the identity of each color, but yet have them mixed together. And then if I want to go even smaller, I use this dedicated coffee grinder, and that is what I've used to make this mixture. Now I'm going to start talking about the different kinds of clay and what happens when they get conditioned and so forth. This is the mixture that I made and churned up in that coffee grinder, and it's a mixture of Super Sculpting and Cernit. I find the Cernit color that I have is too light. It's almost a light beige, and the Super Sculpting usually bakes a little bit too dark, so I use a combination of the two of them. And then I believe when I made this mixture I added just a hint of pink, because I find that they're just a little too on the beige side and I wanted something a little more pink in there, so that's kind of my dedicated flesh tone. And as I need that, I mix that up, and when it's mixed together, this is what it looks like. Now let's talk a little bit more about the conditioning. What I want you to notice, hopefully the camera will pick it up, there's some cracks in this. It has sat for a while after I conditioned it, and even though it was in plastic and so forth, some of the plasticizer has been lost, so it's a little bit on the dry side. So that would definitely need to be reconditioned before I use it. And some of the methods that I've talked about here would help that particular situation. But I've already added some of the ingredients that you see that I've shown you here before. So what I would do with this is I would roll it between my hands to warm it up. Pre-warming it is always really helpful because that makes it softer and easier to work with. And then I would run it through the pasta machine so that it again is ready to use. And the particular character that I'm going to make is going to be a little man. He's going to be dressed in blue jeans and a shirt. So I'm going to show you the colors that I've prepared and preconditioned that are going to go into that particular character. This is a stonewash color of Primo that I used, and it was bought used online, and I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to resurrect this particular block of clay, but I did, because it was pretty pulverized. But I kept adding some of the mold maker and a little bit of diluent, and then had chopped it up with a blade first, and then it was very powdery. So I just kept working with it, adding just tiny thin shavings of the mold maker, and worked it into the clay, and then ran it through the pasta machine. So that's what you see there, and it's kind of borderline dry on the edges, but I don't want to add too much mold maker or diluent and make it mushy. So this may need just a little bit more TLC, but it's pretty close to being ready to go, and if it's warmed up it will take it part of the way, but it may need just a little bit more mold maker. And a little bit better conditioned clay, this was a little softer when I started out, but as you can see it's kind of separating and crackling. And the way you can tell if the clay is conditioned, let me show you a really good way to do that. Can you see kind of the wrinkle that's in here? If the clay is properly conditioned, you should be able to take your thumb or a finger and smooth over a wrinkle like that, and without too much effort like I just did, it should disappear. That is properly conditioned clay. I'm going to try and see if we can capture this on the camera. But what I'm doing is I'm showing you how easy it is with like 3 or 4 strokes to work those wrinkles and those seams out of it. That is when you know your clay is conditioned. Now again, these are kind of borderline, and you see that nasty cracking in there, and that shows me I really need to work on this a little bit more. I need to maybe add a little bit more mold maker. It's pretty soft, so like I said, it's kind of borderline. I don't want it to get too mushy, but it's almost there, and actually warming that up will help a lot. And again, this is kind of borderline, but if 3 or 4 strokes and the seams pretty much disappear.